afternoon. It's 1 p.m. here in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, and this is The Ambassador. With me, your ambassador, Paul Mathenge, where we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. Now, to our first story. As South Africa prepares to host G20 foreign ministers, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced he will not attend, signaling growing tensions between Washington and Pretoria under President Donald Trump administration. Rubio criticized South Africa's policies as, and I quote, anti-American, end of quote, following Trump's recent aid cuts over large reform concerns. South Africa, the first American nation to hold the G20 presidency, aims to prioritize global solidarity, debt relief, and climate action. Paris Kigo reports.
South Africa is set to host foreign minister from G20 nations for the first time under its presidency, but the absence of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio highlights growing diplomatic tensions. With Washington cutting aid and criticizing Pretoria policies, the meeting takes place against a backdrop of shifting global alliances and debate over multilateral cooperation. It is the first meeting of foreign ministers from the G20 group of major economies since South Africa took over its presidency in December last year. Last week, Trump cut aid and assistance to South Africa, saying Afrikaners who are descendants of mainly Dutch colonial settlers were being targeted by a new law that allows the government to expropriate private land. Bradlow said major powers such as China would likely look to fill any vacuum left by the United States in the multilateral grouping, but suggested other outcomes were possible too. The G20 is made up of 19 countries representing some of the world's largest economies, as well as the European Union. Analyst says Rubio's absence represents the Trump administration indifference to multilateral bodies, but Rubio has also directly rejected South Africa's priorities for its G20 presidency. South Africa is the first African nation to hold the G20 presidency, and its theme for the grouping this year is solidarity, equality, and sustainability. It says it will use its position to advance the interests of poorer countries, especially with regard to debt refinancing and helping developing nations mitigate the impact of climate change. As South Africa pushes for a more inclusive global agenda, the U.S. withdrawal could create openings for other powers to reshape multilateral cooperation. The summit will test whether middle powers can drive meaningful change in global governance. Paris Kigo, GBS News.
Ugandan opposition figure Dr. Kizza Besigye appeared briefly in court today, but his condition raised serious concerns. The prominent political figure, who has been detained since November, was deemed too unwell to follow proceedings, prompting calls for his immediate release. Besigye's family and legal team insists that his detention is politically motivated and that he requires urgent medical attention. Irene Juguna reports.
Kizza Besigye, a key figure in Uganda's opposition and a four-time presidential candidate, made a rare appearance in a civilian court where his attorneys sought his release. The 67-year-old Besigye appeared frail, visibly struggling to follow the court proceedings. His lawyers expressed their frustration that the case had not yet been resolved and no clear timeline for a decision was provided.
The justice of the case required that today there should be a remedy, there should be a decision, and it should be instant. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And to make matters worse, we have not been given any idea or clue as to when the decision will be given.
Besigye's detention dates back to November, when he was reportedly kidnapped in Nairobi, Kenya. He was later brought before a military tribunal, charged with offenses related to national security and treason. Treason, under military law, carries the death penalty. Besigye's legal team maintains that the charges are politically motivated, arguing that he and other civilians facing trial in military courts should have been released following a ruling from Uganda's Supreme Court, which declared trials unconstitutional. His wife Winnie Banyuma, who is the executive director of UNAIDS, called the situation devastating but not surprising.
I'm devastated, but I'm not surprised. Besigye is a captive. He was kidnapped. He's in captivity, as we all are. Museveni has put all of us in captivity.
Political analysts and right groups, including Amnesty International, have condemned Besigye's detention.
We call on the Ugandan authorities to immediately release Kizza Besigye, Haj Obeid Lutale, Aaron Kiza, and others who are unlawfully detained. The abduction and rendition of Kizza Besigye and Haj Obeid Lutale blatantly violates international human rights law and the principles of extradition treaties.
They argue that his arrest and treatment violate international human rights law, especially the right to a fair trial. The Commonwealth has also called for his release, along with that of his assistant Obeid Lutale, who is also facing charges. His supporters, as well as other opposition figures, famously known as Bobi Wine, have denounced the case as a politically motivated persecution designed to silence opposition to President Yoweri Museveni's rule.
This is not prosecution, this is persecution. Dr. Besigye would not be brought to court today if it was not for pressure. You notice this is the same judge that sent Kakwenza to prison instead of sending him to the ICU after grave torture. This is the same judge that the cash bonanza parliament was legal. That is sending Dr. Kizza Besigye back to prison instead of sending him to hospital.
Kizza Besigye's health remains a major concern, and many warn that any harm to him could spark unrest in Uganda. The international community is closely watching developments, urging the Ugandan government to respect the rights of its citizens and provide Besigye with the medical care he urgently needs. Reporting for GBS News, Irene Juguna.
South Africa's Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, has been forced to postpone the unveiling of the national budget after a sharp disagreement within the country's coalition government. The delay follows opposition to a proposed increase in the value-added tax rate, a move that could have placed additional strain on South Africans already struggling with the cost of living crisis. The delay has sent shockwaves through the country, with the rand falling sharply against the United States dollars. Triza Chengo reports.
South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has been forced to delay the presentation of the national budget following intense disagreement within the coalition government. The delay stems from a dispute over Godongwana's proposal to raise the value-added tax rate from 15% to 17%. The move was met with significant opposition from coalition partners who argued that it will exacerbate the financial struggles of South Africans already grappling with a cost of living crisis. Godongwana, a member of the African National Congress, is navigating the complexities of governing in a coalition after the NNC lost its parliamentary majority in the last year's elections. His failure to table the budget has sent shockwaves across the country, marking a first since the end of apartheid in 1994. The news had an immediate impact on South Africa's economy, with the national currency sharply decreasing against the US dollar as markets reacted negatively to the political uncertainty. The Democratic Alliance, the second largest party in the coalition, was one of the most vocal critics of the proposed VAT increase. Democratic Alliance leader John argued that such an increase would be detrimental to the economy, citing that it will place an unbearable strain on South Africans. Despite the cabinet's initial approval of the proposed hike, many coalition partners, including Freedom Front Plus, expressed frustration that they were only made aware of the plan shortly before Godongwana was scheduled to present the budget. In response to the controversy, Godongwana confirmed that the proposed VAT increase had been discussed during the cabinet meeting last week. The budget, initially scheduled for unveiling this week, has now been postponed until March 12th to allow for discussions and to address the concerns raised by the coalition members. members. The economic freedom fighters criticized the postponement, calling it a sign of weak and indecisive government. Meanwhile, the Democratic Alliance viewed the delay as a victory, pledging to continue advocating for a budget that will prioritize growth and employment, which they believe will be better for the country's economic future. Triza Tiengo, GBS News.
Sudan has strongly condemned Kenya for hosting the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, a paramilitary group engaged in violent power struggle with the Sudanese army. The Sudanese government accuses Kenya of violating international law and undermining Sudan's sovereignty by allowing the Rapid Support Forces to hold talks about forming a parallel government. Irene Juguna reports.
In a statement, Sudan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs sharply criticized Kenya for allowing the Rapid Support Forces to hold a meeting in Nairobi. Sudan calls this a blatant disregard for international law, accusing Kenya of interfering in its internal affairs and undermining its sovereignty. The RSF, which is engaged in an ongoing war with Sudan's army, has been accused of horrific war crimes, including ethnic massacres and attacks on displaced persons. Sudan's government warns that Kenya's actions amount to support for these crimes and are a direct challenge to regional stability. Sudan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has warned that Kenya's decision to host the RSF goes beyond diplomatic concern. It is seen as an endorsement of the group's actions, which the Sudanese government calls acts of genocide and crimes against humanity. Sudan has also criticized Kenya for violating bilateral agreements and pledges made not to allow hostile activities against Sudan on its soil. Sudan views this move as a direct challenge to its authority and sovereignty, with fears that the conflict may spread beyond its borders. With both the Sudanese army and RSF engaged in brutal conflict, the situation in Sudan grows more dire, and international condemnation against Kenya highlights the deepening tensions in the region. Reporting for GBS News, Irene Juguna.
The ambassador will take a short break. We'll be right back with more as we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics.
Hello, kids. Did you know a year has 31,557,600 seconds? Why do you think so? Exactly. There are 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, and 365 and 25 days in a year. We count the extra 0.25 because of leap year. When you multiply all these numbers together, you get a huge number of seconds. That's why a year feels long, but time still flies when you are having fun.
What is always before you but can't be seen?
Kudiscover talent.
Kudiscover ulijuangaje like unaweza imba like yeah.
Kini Trace Jumi Kipchoge kwa ngoma na mfala wananidis na wanabonga kwa ngoma, mafanjo wananipenda ndo nazidi kwa roga, wenye walenjaribu manze walishachoka na nikozabe meditation naendelesha generation niliofanya
Wewe at 1 year old ulikuwa unafanya nini? You're feeling the vibe. Ulitoa a few days ago, unaweza taka utuambie like ulikuwa unafikiria nini when you came up with the lyrics? Yeah.
So I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm tryna boss, let me do my thing. And if you're tryna win, you can be on my team. Yeah, so I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm tryna boss, let me do my thing.
You feel like you're young at heart, I'm an old soul. If you could only listen to one singer or band for the rest of your life, who will you choose?
This is the youth hub show that gets a groove on. We have so many topics lined up for you guys.
Can you survive without internet?
No, I can't. Siwezi survive bila internet mimi.
Hii ni kama kuambia mtu mwenye alikuwa amezoea kushindana nguo, mwambie toa nguo ushinde.
She's still like Tito who believes in miracles.
Don't you believe in miracles?
Don't you believe in miracles?
If you love, akili inafungika na macho, you won't see anything negative in the relationship.
So my films, I can get funding to get a lot of time to do pre-production, so that when I'm shooting, costume ulishapanga, kila watu wako wanajua navaje, shooting location, like that process ya kwenda ku secure location, kwenda ku secure location, you get and like wow, this location ikeza pata,
this is where it will all happen.
It makes you happy.
Kuwa na vitu mingi sana, mapanga le nini, tunachikisa hizo issues zimekuwa zinachocha sana. Tunataka tuka hivyo tu bila hii mambo ya mneti.
Are you ready? So guess the logo. Reveal.
Cadillac.
Cadillac. Unasema Cadillac.
Tunapenda watu we love communicating, we love welcoming people.
Internet ilikuja kutupangiza.
Welcome back to the Ambassador. Now, Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani has reaffirmed his commitment to a Gaza ceasefire, emphasizing it's a crucial step toward a lasting truce. His remarks came during a visit to Iran, where President Masoud Pezeshkian also stressed the rights of Palestinians amid growing tensions over United States plans for enclave. Peris Kigo reports.
During a visit to Tehran, Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad reiterated his country's commitment to mediating a Gaza ceasefire, calling for a just and comprehensive resolution for Palestinians. Iran President Masoud Pezeshkian echoed similar sentiment, rejecting U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal to relocate Gaza population and place the enclave under Washington control. The comments appear to be a reaction to U.S. President Donald Trump's plan for Gaza 2 million people to be removed from the enclave, for Washington to then take ownership of it and to oversee a year-long construction process. Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin meanwhile called for a just and comprehensive settlement for Palestinians. He said this paved the way for the reconstruction and working toward a comprehensive settlement because the Palestinian people will not settle for anything less. Peris Kigo, GPS News.
In a significant development in the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict, Hamas fighters have gathered in Khan Yunis to hand over the bodies of 4 hostages, including members of Biba's family. This comes after weeks of intense negotiations and highlights the ongoing humanitarian crisis that has gripped both sides since the outbreak of war. Irene Juguna reports.
The southern Gaza city of Khan Yunis today, Hamas fighters are preparing to hand over the remains of 4 hostages, including the Biba's family, whose tragic ordeal has become a focal point of the hostage crisis. The Biba's family, captured during the early days of the conflict, has symbolized the personal toll of the ongoing violence and the deep emotional impact felt on both sides. Reports indicate that the handover is part of a broader effort involving international mediation and negotiations aimed at recovering bodies and facilitating the release of hostages held by Hamas. The Biba's family, known for their ties to Israel, have captured the hearts of many, with their case drawing widespread attention from the international community. The Beba's family's tragedy underscores the human cost of the ongoing war, which has led to thousands of lives lost on both sides. As both nations deal with the fallout, the question of how to bring lasting peace remains as elusive as ever. Reporting for GBS News, Irene Juguna.
Barrick Gold has reached a deal with the government of Mali to resolve the lengthy dispute over its mining operations. The agreement, which is still pending official approval from Mali, includes a payment of $438 million from Barrick in exchange for the release of detained employees, seized gold, and the restart of the Loulo-Gounkoto mine. This comes after nearly 2 years of tensions, largely triggered by Mali's new mining code, which gives the government a larger share in the country's gold wealth. Triza Chengo reports.
Canadian mining company Barrick Gold has reached a new agreement with the government of Mali, potentially ending a nearly 2-year-long dispute over its gold mining assets. The deal, which is awaiting formal approval from Mali's government, will allow Barrick to resume operations at its Loulo-Gounkoto mine in exchange for a payment of $438 million. Barrick's gold output has been impacted by the suspension of the mine, and the company has already lowered its 2024 production forecast. The dispute also resulted in Mali losing out on significant revenue, with Barrick estimating a $550 million contribution to the government's treasury had the mine remained open. Shares of Barrick Gold have seen a slight uptick on the Toronto Stock Exchange, with investors eyeing the potential resolution as a positive for the company amid record high gold prices. This agreement comes as Mali continues to scrutinize its mining sector following a military-led government takeover in 2020. While Barrick has launched arbitration against the country, it remains to be seen if the illegal case will be dropped in light of the new deal. Triza Tiengo, GBS News.
And that's all for today. With me, your Ambassador Paul Mathenge on the Ambassador 1 p.m. Follow all of our stories at GBS TV Africa. It's updated through the day. We meet tomorrow as we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. Thank you for your time and company.
Everywhere, GBS.